So I'm joined now by Seamus McMinimum, sheepmeat and livestock manager for Borbia. Seamus, I suppose, would start me off, I suppose, by talking about the trade to date this year for lambs.
I suppose at the minute our quotes are sitting in around €6, €6.20, so we're actually bang on exactly where we were last year.
Yeah.
But obviously some of that has been eroded by the higher cost of production that we've seen at the farm level. At the minute, there are fairly tight supplies of lambs for processing, and we've seen that in terms of even the quality of lambs that's being presented for slaughter. Their average carcass weights are back to about a kilo, so you're talking about a 19.5 kilo lamb, whereas this time last year you would have been 20.5. And even then, getting the correct cover on that lamb as well. You know, there's a lot of lambs that are now maybe a 2 for fat cover as opposed to what would have been a 3 last year. And I suppose that is coming off the challenging sort of production conditions we've seen this summer. You know, we've seen drought, very dry conditions obviously at farm levels impacted grass growth, and then we've got farmers that are feeding less creep obviously because it's high cost, and that's completely understandable, and that's then slowed down the number of lambs that's obviously available for processing.
Because what is it, it's down nearly 70,000, is it roughly?
It's actually a wee more, it's actually down by about 82,000. So you add into that we had extra ewes in the last census, and we had a fairly good lambing and no real mortality. You're probably talking about an extra 110, 120,000 extra sheep in the system compared to this time last year.
Perfect. And I suppose then, Seamus, the big question is, with the cost of inputs, looking towards the back end of the year, can farmers be optimistic maybe about a price rise, or what are the markets, what is demand from the markets telling us?
Well, I suppose the minute, as I mentioned, there are those extra sheep in the system, so the likelihood is we'll see an increase in throughput in the last quarter of the year, as well as a bigger carryover of hoglets into next year as well, just with those extra sheep about. I suppose at the minute, supply and demand are dictating the price. It's very difficult to say, but we have seen weaker demand for lamb in some of the key markets for lamb. You know, obviously it's a very high cost protein, even in comparison to your beef. So we've seen people switch out of the category. So I suppose Borbia's response to this is that we've increased our marketing activity in our key sort of export markets.
And those key markets, sorry Seamus, what they would be?
Well, Europe takes about 75% of all the lamb that we export, and then the UK maybe another 15 or 20 on top of that. So obviously the key focus for us at the minute is the EU market. So we're looking for increased promotional activity in France, Germany, Belgium, and then also into Switzerland as well, which are key markets for Irish lamb.
And what has been attributed to that drop in demand from them key markets?
There's a few things. There's actually less lamb about as well. We've obviously haven't seen a whole pile of lamb about being imported from the likes of New Zealand and Australia onto the market, so there's actually less lamb available. The high price point is the biggest barrier, and I suppose we've seen less promotional activity with the individual retailers, and a lot of lamb is actually bought on promotion in some of these markets, so it does impact then the volume of lamb that's been sold. And you know, when you're going to the consumer, we've seen it, we've seen food inflation of in around 10-12% a lot of the markets, 14% if you go over to Eastern Europe, which is sort of an emerging market for sheep meat. So it is a challenging situation in terms of getting customers to consider lamb. But I suppose it's not all negative either. You know, we're in a situation where global sheep meat supplies are not expected any major recovery. We've seen New Zealand seeing a further reduction in their ewe flock of 2%. We've also seen, I suppose, the redirection of product away towards China. China's actually seen a recovery in import demand in the last 2 months or so that's quite positive. You know, and the redirection of product, you know, away into the Middle East, North Africa, the US. So that means there's less of it coming into Europe and to compete against ourselves.
I suppose farmers be wondering, there is less product coming in. Why isn't prices kind of staying up there? It's that seasonal trend of prices coming back gradually.
I suppose lamb prices do tend, as supplies of lamb increase, the price does tend to go back anyway. You know, lamb is very dictated by supply and demand. You know, we do have a lot more lambs in the system, as I said, that are due to come out. But I suppose the key underlying factor is that consumer spend and that inflation. You know, it is the highest cost red meat, so it is going to be the most prone to be hit by inflation. You know, we're working with a view of the process at the minute, looking at, you know, promoting cheaper cuts of lamb as opposed to, you know, to your roasting and your bigger cuts, you know, in an effort to drive volume in the markets. So I suppose we're taking what we're feeding back from our offices, and we're sort of adapting our plans to suit.
I suppose even just looking to home in terms of consumer demand here, has it tailed off since COVID? We saw during COVID, obviously people were at home, they were buying more locally. Is that kind of, what's the situation there now?
suppose if you look at the volume and value are probably both back about 10-12%. That's the 12 weeks up to the end of September there. So it is back a bit, but some of that will have been counteracted by recovery in food service. Obviously, this time a year ago, there still would have been some restrictions and people were still nervous about eating out and things. But I suppose so about a 10% reduction at retail coming from the latest Kantar reports. But as I said, that needs to be taken with the caveat that there's more being added in food service. Now, similar to their export markets, you've got high food inflation, you've got there's high cost protein, and I suppose it's just about on the domestic market, we're very focused on showing consumers the versatility of lamb and how it can be used. It's not just your roast on a Sunday. It is a very versatile meat that can be used for your midweek meal, and that's sort of the focus of our domestic campaign activity.
And I suppose lastly, Seamus, talking about key export markets, one market that potentially for Irish lamb is the US. What's the story there? It seems to have gone quiet since that announcement was made earlier in the year.
Yeah. Obviously, their trade mission earlier in the year, they announced that we had access granted to the US market, but I suppose that was just the first stage in the process. So now every individual plant now needs to apply for USDA approval, and that's underway. So I suppose it's quite a detailed process that involves a lot of stages and things. So it is hoped that we will have product in the market by Q1. Obviously, we've got our European by Q1 next year. And I suppose we have got our EU campaigns all sitting ready to go and our promotion activity kicked off. And as well as that, then we're doing a bit of an insight study in the US market to sort of see where is the potential wins for us. Obviously, it's a market that's dominated by Australia and New Zealand. So we're looking as where is our space in that, and it's looking like it's going to be high end. So it'll be not massive volumes, but a high price market we're aiming for there once we get the approval, plant approval, and product into the market.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Seamus, for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.